The invitation came at 4:47 p.m., a single line in my inbox that stopped my heart. Drinks at my place tonight, Robert? Ethan. My boss, Ethan Caldwell, the man whose mere presence made my pulse race, had just asked me to his apartment. I stared at the screen, the fluorescent lights of the office suddenly too bright, my tie too tight, as if the world had tilted just enough to throw me off balance. I'd been working at Caldwell and Company, a sleek Manhattan marketing firm, for 6 months, and every day felt like a tightrope walk. Ethan was a legend in the industry, charismatic, brilliant, and unfairly handsome at 29, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. He was also openly gay, a fact that made my own carefully guarded secret feel like a live wire in my chest. I'd spent my life in the closet, raised in a small Ohio town where being different wasn't just frowned upon. It was dangerous. Now, at 27, I was in New York, chasing a career and a version of myself I hadn't yet dared to meet. Ethan's email was a spark, and I was kindling waiting to catch fire. I typed a reply, "Sounds great. What time?" and hit send before I could overthink it. My hands trembled as I packed up my desk, the office emptying out around me. By 7 p.m., I was standing outside Ethan's Soho loft, a bottle of Cabernet clutched in one hand, my reflection in the glass door showing a man who looked more confident than I felt. I adjusted my tie, smoothed my hair, and rang the buzzer. Ethan opened the door, and I forgot how to breathe. He was out of his usual tailored suit, wearing a soft gray sweater that hugged his frame and jeans that looked effortlessly expensive. "Robert, you made it," he said, his voice warm, his smile disarming. "Come in, make yourself at home." The loft was everything I'd imagined. Open, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's glittering skyline. A jazz record played softly, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and citrus. Ethan took the wine, his fingers brushing mine for a split second, sending a jolt through me. "Nice choice," he said, glancing at the label. "Let's open it." We settled on his plush sofa, the city lights casting a glow across the room. Ethan poured the wine, the deep red catching the light as he handed me a glass. "To new beginnings," he toasted, his eyes locking onto mine. I clinked my glass against his, my throat dry despite the sip I took. We talked about work at first, then music, then the city. Ethan had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world, his attention a spotlight I both craved and feared. By the second glass, I was loosening up, the wine smoothing the edges of my nerves. Ethan leaned closer, his arm resting on the back of the sofa, his fingers inches from my shoulder. "You're different, Robert," he said, his voice low. "You've got this quiet intensity, like you're holding something back." My heart pounded. I wanted to tell him everything, about the years spent hiding, the fear that clung to me like a shadow, the way his laugh made me want to risk it all. But I didn't. I just smiled, deflecting. "Just trying to keep up with you, boss." He laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight. "Call me Ethan tonight," he said. "No hierarchy here." The third glass was where it all changed. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Ethan's knee brushed mine, and he didn't pull away. I didn't either. He set his glass down, his gaze steady, searching. "Robert," he said softly, "why do I get the feeling there's more to you than you let on?" I froze, the weight of his words pressing against the walls I'd built. My life had been a series of careful choices, each one designed to keep me safe, invisible. But Ethan saw me, and it terrified me as much as it thrilled me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, I set my glass down, my hand trembling, and looked at him. Really looked at him. His eyes held no judgment, only curiosity, maybe something more. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Be myself." Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out, his hand resting lightly on mine. "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to try." In that moment, the world outside the loft ceased to exist. There was only Ethan, his touch grounding me, his presence pulling me toward a truth I'd spent years running from. I leaned closer, my heart a drumbeat, and when his lips met mine, it was like the first breath after years underwater. The kiss was soft at first, then urgent, a collision of need and relief. I was falling, and for once, I didn't want to catch myself. But as our lips parted, reality crashed back. Ethan was my boss. I was a man who'd never said the word gay out loud, not even to myself. The weight of it hit me like a wave, and I pulled back, my breath ragged. Ethan, I can't, I stammered, standing abruptly. I'm sorry. His eyes widened, concern flickering across his face. Robert, wait. But I was already moving toward the door, my heart racing for all the wrong reasons now. I didn't look back as I stepped into the cool night air, the city's hum drowning out the sound of my own fear. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and the man I'd left behind was the one person who could unravel me completely. The next morning, I woke to a headache and a heart that felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. The memory of Ethan's lips on mine burned, a reckless moment I couldn't undo. I'd kissed my boss, then run like a coward into the night, leaving behind a mess I had no idea how to face. I avoided the office all morning, claiming a sick day in a curt email to HR. My Brooklyn apartment, a cramped studio with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall, felt like a cage. I paced, replaying every second of last night. The way Ethan's hand felt on mine, the warmth in his voice, the way I'd bolted when it all became too real. My phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from colleagues about a big campaign, but nothing from Ethan. His silence was louder than any rejection. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and headed to a coffee shop in Williamsburg, hoping caffeine and strangers would drown out my thoughts. The place was packed, hipsters typing furiously on laptops, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, staring at the street but seeing only Ethan's face. Rough night, a voice asked. I looked up to find a barista, a lanky guy with a septum piercing and kind eyes, wiping down a nearby table. His name tag read Jasper. Something like that, I muttered, forcing a smile. He nodded, like he'd heard it all before. You've got that look, like you're running from something bigger than a hangover. I froze, caught off guard by his perceptiveness. Maybe I am, I said, surprising myself. Ever feel like you're about to ruin everything you've worked for? Jasper laughed, a low, easy sound. Every damn day. But sometimes, ruining things is how you figure out what matters. He moved on to the next table, leaving me with words that felt like a lifeline I wasn't ready to grab. I sipped my coffee, my mind drifting back to Ethan. He wasn't just my boss. He was the first person who'd made me feel seen, not as Robert the marketing analyst, but as Robert, the man who'd spent years hiding behind a carefully crafted mask. Growing up in Ohio, I'd learned early to blend in, play football, date girls, keep my head down. College wasn't much different. I majored in business, joined a frat, and buried my truth so deep I almost convinced myself it didn't exist. But New York was supposed to be my fresh start, and Ethan was the spark that threatened to burn down my defenses. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was him. A single text. Can we talk? I'm at the office. My stomach twisted. I wanted to ignore it, to disappear into the city and pretend last night never happened. But I couldn't. I owed him an explanation, even if I didn't have one. The office was quiet when I arrived, most of the team out for lunch. Ethan's office door was ajar, and he was at his desk, his sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. Robert, he said, standing as I entered. I wasn't sure you'd come. I almost didn't, I admitted, closing the door behind me. The room felt smaller than usual, the air thick with everything unsaid. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. Last night, I didn't mean to push you. If I misread things, I'm sorry. You didn't misread, I said quickly, the words spilling out before I could stop them. It's me. I've never done this before. Not with anyone. His brow furrowed, then softened as understanding dawned. You mean you've never been out? I nodded, my throat tight. I grew up in a place where being gay wasn't an option. I moved here to start over, but I'm still figuring out how to be honest with myself, let alone anyone else. Ethan's expression was gentle, but there was a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe, or relief. You don't have to have it all figured out, he said. But you don't have to run, either. Not from me. I wanted to believe him, to let go of the fear that had chained me for so long. But the weight of my past, of my job, of the life I'd built, pressed down on me. You're my boss, Ethan, I said, my voice breaking. What happens if this goes wrong? He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his presence. I don't know, he admitted. but I know I haven't stopped thinking about you since you walked into this office 6 months ago. And last night, that wasn't just a moment for me. His words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away my defenses. I wanted to kiss him again, to lose myself in the possibility of us. But the fear was still there, a shadow I couldn't outrun. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. I left his office with my heart in my throat, torn between the man I was and the man I wanted to be. The city outside buzzed with life, indifferent to the war inside me. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, a chance that I could stop running and start living. The next week was a blur of avoidance and aching want. I threw myself into work, staying late to tweak campaign analytics, hoping the numbers would drown out the memory of Ethan's touch. But every time he passed my desk, his glance lingered, a quiet question in his eyes that I wasn't ready to answer. Friday night found me at a dive bar in the East Village, nursing a beer and scrolling through my phone to distract myself. The bar was loud, packed with people laughing and clinking glasses, but I felt like I was underwater, the sounds muffled by my thoughts. I'd been dodging Ethan's attempts to talk, replying to his texts with vague excuses about deadlines. But the truth was, I was terrified, not just of him, but of what he represented, a life where I didn't have to hide. "Hey, stranger," a familiar voice said. I looked up to see Jasper, the barista from the coffee shop, sliding into the seat across from me. He was off duty, his septum piercing glinting under the bar's neon lights, a leather jacket slung over his shoulder. "You look like you're carrying the world." I laughed, a brittle sound. "Just my own baggage." He tilted his head, studying me. "Want to share the load? I'm a good listener." Maybe it was the beer, or maybe it was the weight of keeping everything inside, but I started talking. Not about Ethan specifically, but about growing up in Ohio, the suffocating pressure to be someone I wasn't, the fear that followed me even to New York. Jasper listened, his eyes steady, no judgment in his expression. "I came out when I was 19, he said when I finished. "Scariest thing I ever did. My family didn't take it well, but I found people who did. You will too. I don't know if I'm ready," I admitted. "There's someone. But it's complicated." Jasper smirked. "It's always complicated. But if they're worth it, you'll figure it out." His words stuck with me as I left the bar, the city's pulse matching my own. I walked aimlessly, the cool October air clearing my head. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew I couldn't keep avoiding Ethan. I pulled out my phone and texted him, "Can we meet? Tomorrow?" His reply was instant. "My place, 7 p.m. Just us." The next evening, I stood outside Ethan's loft again, my nerves a live wire. He opened the door, and the sight of him, casual in a black t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly mussed, made my chest ache. "You came," he said, his voice soft, like he hadn't been sure I would. We sat on the same sofa as before, but this time, there was no wine, no pretense. Just us, the city humming outside. "I'm sorry for running," I said, the words spilling out. I freaked out. "I've spent my whole life pretending, and you make me want to stop." Ethan's eyes softened, but he didn't interrupt, letting me speak. I told him about Ohio, about the fear that had shaped me, about the part of me that wanted to be brave, but didn't know how. When I finished, the silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "I know what it's like to hide. I came out in college, and it cost me friends, family even. But it gave me myself. You deserve that, Robert." I swallowed hard, his words cutting through the noise in my head. What if I messed this up? Us, the job, everything. He leaned closer, his hand resting on the sofa between us. "You won't lose your job, I promise. As for us, we'll figure it out together. If you want that." I did. God, I wanted it so much it scared me. I reached for his hand, my fingers trembling as they laced with his. "I want to try," I said, my voice steady for the first time. Ethan smiled, a slow, radiant thing that made my heart stutter. He leaned in, and this time, when we kissed, I didn't pull away. It was slow, deliberate, a promise of something new. His hand cupped my face, and I let myself fall into it. The fear still there, but quieter now, overshadowed by something stronger. We talked late into the night, about his life, his struggles, the way he'd fought to be unapologetically himself. He told me about his first love, a college boyfriend who broke his heart, and the years it took to rebuild. I shared pieces of my own story, each word a step toward the person I wanted to be. When I left his loft, the city felt different, brighter, somehow, like I'd shed a layer of myself I no longer needed. But as I walked home, a new fear crept in. Ethan and I were crossing a line, one that could change everything. And in the back of my mind, I wondered if the world I'd built in New York was ready for the man I was becoming. The next few weeks were a tightrope of exhilaration and dread. Ethan and I were careful at work, keeping our interactions professional, but stolen glances and subtle touches, a hand on my shoulder, a smile that lingered too long, made the office feel electric. Outside work, we were building something fragile but real, meeting for coffee, late-night walks, moments that felt like stolen breaths. But the secrecy was a weight. I wasn't out, not to my colleagues, not to the world. Ethan was patient, never pushing, but I could see the question in his eyes. When will you be ready? I didn't have an answer. Every step toward him felt like a step away from the safety I'd clung to for so long. One evening, we were at a small jazz club in Harlem, tucked into a corner booth, the music wrapping around us like a cocoon. Ethan's knee pressed against mine under the table, a quiet anchor. You ever think about what it'd be like to just be? He asked, his voice low over the saxophone's wail. All the time, I said, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. But it's not that simple. Not for me. He nodded, his expression soft but serious. I know, but you're not alone in this, Robert. You don't have to be. His words stayed with me, but so did the fear. The next day at work, everything changed. We were in a team meeting, presenting a campaign for a major client. I was mid-sentence when Sarah, a senior account manager with a knack for gossip, leaned over and whispered loudly to a colleague. Is it just me? Or is there something going on with Ethan and Robert? The room didn't stop, but it felt like it did. My voice faltered, heads turned, and Ethan's eyes met mine across the table, calm but unreadable. I forced myself to finish, my face burning, but the damage was done. By lunch, whispers followed me through the office, curious glances trailing like shadows. I found Ethan in his office, the door closed. They're talking, I said, my voice tight. Sarah saw something, or she's guessing, but it's out there now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. Let them talk. It doesn't change anything. But it does, I snapped, frustration boiling over. I'm not ready for this, Ethan. I'm not you. I can't just own it. His face fell, and I hated myself for it. I'm not asking you to be me, he said quietly. I'm asking you to be you. I left his office without a word, my chest aching. That night, I didn't text him. I didn't go to the bar or the coffee shop. I stayed in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine a world where I could be with Ethan openly and not lose everything else. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was warm, familiar, but it carried the weight of my past. Robbie, you sound tired, she said. Everything okay in the big city? I wanted to tell her. I wanted to say, Mom, I'm falling for someone, and he's incredible, but I'm scared. But I couldn't. The words stuck, just like they always had. Just work stuff? I lied. Busy as always. When I hung up, I felt hollow. I was living half a life, caught between who I was and who I wanted to be. Ethan deserved better. I deserved better. But the thought of coming out, to my family, my colleagues, the world, felt like stepping off a cliff. I avoided Ethan for days, burying myself in work, but the tension in the office was palpable. Sarah's whispers had spread, and I caught colleagues watching me, their curiosity ablaze against my skin. On Friday, Ethan cornered me in the break room, his expression a mix of frustration and concern. We need to talk, he said, his voice low. Not here. My place, tonight. I nodded, unable to say no to him, even now. That evening, his loft felt different, less like a sanctuary, more like a crossroads. He didn't offer wine this time, just sat across from me, his hands clasped. I can't keep doing this, Robert, he said. The hiding, the half-truths. I want to be with you, but not like this. His words cut deeper than I expected. I'm trying, I said, my voice breaking. But I'm not ready to lose everything. You won't lose me, he said, his eyes fierce. But you're losing yourself, and I can't watch that. I stood, my hands shaking. I need to go. This time, he didn't stop me. I walked out into the night, the city's lights blurring through tears I hadn't realized I was holding back. I'd pushed away the one person who saw me, and the weight of that choice was heavier than any fear I'd ever known. The days that followed were a fog of regret and self-doubt. I went through the motions at work, avoiding Ethan's office, his gaze, his everything. The office gossip had quieted, but the damage was done. My secret felt exposed, even if no one said it outright. I was unraveling, and the life I'd built in New York felt like it was slipping through my fingers. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself at the coffee shop again. Jasper was there, wiping down the counter, his easy smile a small comfort. "You look worse than last time," he said, sliding a coffee my way. "Want to talk?" I didn't. Not really, but the words came anyway. I told him about Ethan, about the kiss, the fear, the way I'd pushed him away. Jasper listened, his expression thoughtful. "Sounds like you're in love," he said finally. "And that's scarier than anything." "Love?" I echoed, the word foreign, heavy. "I don't even know who I am." He shrugged. "Maybe that's the point. You figure it out by letting yourself feel it." His words haunted me as I left the shop, wandering the city's streets until dawn. I thought about Ethan, about the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd made me feel alive. I thought about Ohio, my family, the years I'd spent pretending. And for the first time, I asked myself what I wanted, not what was safe, but what was true. The next day, I called in sick and booked a train to Ohio. I needed to face my past before I could build a future. The ride was long, the countryside blurring past, each mile bringing me closer to the life I'd left behind. My parents' house was the same as always, white clapboard, a neat lawn, a place that felt both familiar and suffocating. Dinner was tense, my mom's chatter filling the silence as my dad watched me with quiet concern. After, I sat with them in the living room, the weight of what I needed to say pressing down on me. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm gay." The room went still. My mom's smile faltered, my dad's face unreadable. Then my mom reached for my hand, her eyes wet. "Oh, Robbie," she said. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "I was scared," I admitted. "I thought you'd hate me." My dad stood, and for a moment, I braced myself. But then he pulled me into a hug, his voice rough. "You're our son. Nothing changes that." It wasn't perfect. There were tears, questions, promises to talk more. But it was a start, a crack in the wall I'd built around myself. When I got back to New York, I felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of my fear behind. I went straight to Ethan's loft. He opened the door, his expression guarded but hopeful. "I came out to my parents," I said, the words spilling out. "And I'm done hiding. I want this, us, if you still do." Ethan's face broke into a smile, and he pulled me inside, his arms wrapping around me. "I never stopped," he said, and when he kissed me, it was like coming home. We spent the night talking, planning, dreaming. Ethan told me about his own coming out, the losses and the victories, and I realized we were stronger together. The next day, we walked into the office hand in hand, the whispers starting anew, but this time, I didn't care. I was done running. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Ethan and I were together, openly, and while the office gossip eventually faded, the world felt new. I was learning to live as myself, each day a small act of courage. Ethan was my anchor, his confidence a guide as I navigated this uncharted life. We faced challenges. Some colleagues were less than accepting, their glances cold, but Ethan's position as CEO gave us a shield. He made it clear that prejudice had no place at Caldwell and Company, and slowly, the tension eased. Outside work, we built a life. Dinners in Brooklyn, weekends in the Catskills, moments that felt like promises. One evening, a year after that first night at his loft, we sat on his sofa, the same one where it all began. The city sparkled outside, and Ethan's hand rested in mine. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice warm. "So have we," I replied, squeezing his hand. I thought about the man I'd been, the fear that had held me back, and the love that had set me free. Ethan wasn't just my boss anymore. He was my partner, my home. I leaned in, kissing him softly, the third glass long forgotten, but its impact forever etched in my heart. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it would lead. I was Robert, unapologetically myself, and that was enough.